and welcome to the Forkman and Friends podcast, the podcast that is a little bit different to others, where I speak to awesome people doing awesome things or amazing things. My friend joining me this week is Bryan Madigan. Welcome, Bryan.
Hey man, thanks again for having us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to chat with you again.
Yeah, you too. I mean, it was only a couple of months ago, but I enjoyed it when we did have that chat, so that was fun.
Yeah, well, welcome. So I did a new podcast. That should give you a little bit of a rundown what we do. So I talk to people who do amazing things. So the other week I spoke to one of my friends who I do camps with. This week it's you, because you do radio.
Yeah, I'm still doing it. My initial role now is considerably different to when I first sort of got into this game. Initially, when I first got in, I was all about getting on air. That was, the number one priority for me. But that's all changed now. It's just how life has sort of worked its way in, and my career has spanned out. And even though still being in radio, it's interesting that the desire to still be on air is there, but it's in a completely different medium now. It's what you're doing right now.
Yeah,
that's now the new desire.
Yeah. And different to what it would have been back, say, 10, 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 20 years ago, podcasting wasn't even a thing. The audio landscape was purely radio. That was it. If you wanted to get your voice on the air, it was just radio. So that's how things are evolved right now. That I see doing things like this a little bit more interesting now. It's regular radio as such. It can be a little bit stifling these days.
Yeah, and now you're more behind the scenes guy now.
Yeah, well, I took the career sort of more behind the scenes for a stability purpose. So to do a really quick lap about my career, I actually first started in Sydney radio, but because I wanted stability, I ended up going around with a couple of Queensland radio stations and then going down to Melbourne, and eventually I'm now back in Sydney. So I saw stability in behind the scenes, because one of the ultimate goals for me is, after leaving Sydney, was actually to get straight back there. Initially, I thought I would go up to Queensland and then I'd be straight back. It took a long time to get back here, but I got back.
Yeah, I remember listening to you up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, even up there, the reality of an on-air persona sort of really hit me hard and fast. Whereas I wasn't part of a breakfast team as such. I was what you would just call a music jock, and you don't get that much room to real. I mean, you can show your personality, but you just don't get enough room. Is what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
And to get those positions where you could express yourself a little bit more, the market and the talent pool was so thick and so deep. It just occurred to me that I would be spending even longer out in the wilderness, if I could put it like that, before getting back to Sydney.
Yeah. Do you mind pausing for a second? I just got So as you were just saying before we paused there for a moment, we were talking about how you did the lap of
I did an East Coast run.
Yeah, an East Coast run.
Southeast.
Southeast, yeah. So after after you were in Queensland, you went down to Melbourne and you spent a few years at Gold.
Yeah,
Gold.
so I started at Gold in the very beginning of 2015, and then left at the very end of 2018 to start back up in Sydney in 2019.
And while you were there, you got to work with an awesome breakfast show that I love listening to, the Christian O'Connell breakfast show.
Yeah, I find this experiment fascinating, and I was a big supporter of it as soon as it was sort of announced to the team. Now, full disclosure, I had no idea who Christian was. I had zero idea. But after it was sort of announced to us internally, I went and, did my research.
Googled.
And, I started listening to him, and he has a show that really resonated with me in the way that he ran it. And when I say it resonated with me, I loved how Christian, even though his name is all over everything, the Christian O'Connell breakfast show,
Yeah.
it was his ability to make characters out of his support crew with Katrina and Jack Post. And, producer Brad at the time, and when I was working there, producer Bex, like they all became sort of characters within the show, and it had that amazing family vibe to it that I hadn't really seen. I'd seen it being tried before with other breakfast shows that I had sort of helped out here and there along during my radio journey, but he sort of really nailed it, in my opinion. So when I heard that and it came down, I really wanted to be a part of that, even though my behind the scenes role wasn't necessarily going to give me any sort of in with him, because I'm just the music director at Gold at the time. They sort of given me a title of operations manager, which, you sort of overlook everything. I had Chris Holland there, who's an amazing music guy. So he sort of took the reins of looking after the music as such. And because there were some certain things going on with PDs and all that sort of stuff, like I was given, the responsibility of handling Gold sort of for a bit of this time while they introduced the new program director.
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough to sort of be given the opportunity to sort of help out. And I became a part of that family for a good brief 6 or 7 months it was.
Yeah.
And, leaving Melbourne after getting that opportunity, that made things actually really hard. Like I really struggled with the realization that, my desperate want to come home to Sydney was actually now being overshadowed with how much fun I was having working on that show.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now at night or something, they do the best bits of Christian's show.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
around the network, the ARN network now, what they used to call the Pure Gold Network. So a couple of the other markets, Sydney gets a 1 hour cut down version of his show. So a couple of the best bits of that morning show comes on now at 7 o'clock. So, you can, if you're still into old school radio listening at the time, you can tune in at that point. Obviously he's got his podcast, which is more how I sort of ingest his content, also with the other forms of social media as well.
Yeah.
So, it's there, and I see it as more, it would be silly not to put him on and basically expose him, because if people hear that, then they go, all right, who is this guy? He sounds pretty good. Then hopefully it boosts up his podcast numbers and it boosts up his social media interactions.
And we're now getting Jonesy and Amanda down here. for
Yeah, so
1 hour.
yeah, and then that that decision was made as well. And they've got huge. Jonesy and Amanda used to be on in Melbourne back when I first got there in 2015. They called it something else, though. I think at the time they called it like the Afternoon Delight.
Yeah.
When I first got there. That was there for about a year and a half, and then I have no idea why it was pulled. At the time, I wasn't privy to those decisions at the time, but it was just taken away. And then, you know, the 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 gold brand, the pure gold network as such, they just see, we've got this huge, talent pool here in Christian and Jonesy and Amanda. Let's share it with everyone.
And I've been actually finding that awesome, especially with the times we're going through at the moment. I have been something to wind down to.
Yeah, well, what for the radio insiders and all that sort of stuff, the one thing that we've known is that during this down period of COVID, the listening to radio online has increased. The radio listening through its usual terrestrial form has increased. The podcast downloads have also increased. So it was, in my opinion, a very smart move to make, and to almost to take advantage of a bad situation. It just made proper sense. We got more people listening. Let's put them in front of those ears.
Okay, so I'm going to take you back I'm just going to work out how long. About 12 years ago.
Okay.
Back in 2018. No, 2008.
Yeah.
Back to 2008 when you were doing phone duties and
Yeah.
panel
Yeah.
for the good old Spoonie, who did a talkback show, one of the only talkback shows on FM that I knew of at the time.
No, it was. I mean,
Yeah.
as far as the metro market goes, it was the only FM talkback show.
Yeah, you worked in that, and you were known as Odie back then.
Yeah. Well, the main panel op for Spoonman, the guy who was pushing on the buttons for him, because when Spoonie first came back to Triple M for that second run, I think he's on his fourth or fifth run now with Triple M, but when he came back for that second run, they said to him, what do you want? We can only give you one staff member. Do you want somebody on the phones for you, or do you want a panel op? And he chose to go with the panel op because it allowed him to. This is how I remember it. So if you ever speak to Garfield or Spoonie, they might say, no, that's not how it happened. But I think he wanted the panel op because he just didn't want, the hassle of having to deal with all the buttons. And back before I got there, Spoonie used to answer his own phones as well.
That would have been different.
Yeah, well, they just had to do it because Garfield was pushing the buttons, and Garfield was also answering the phones, and then Spoonie would answer the phones where he can. Like, he was doing his string songs and collecting his thoughts together. So the two of them were handling it. And basically what they found was it was getting a little bit too much to handle. There was the Steve Irwin controversy.
Yeah, and
sort of escalated stuff.
And from the memory, from what I kind of remember your speech, kind of remember a bit of your speech from the last ever Spoonman episode.
Oh God, that's what we said in those things.
Oh, you said it was because of some guy on grand final day who dropped the C-bomb or something.
That could be it, yeah.
That you got the job to work with Spoonman.
Well, there's a couple of
but you almost didn't get it.
Yeah, it was a couple of different things. I think there was that. The Steve Irwin thing also contributed to it for some reason, just because the amount of calls that they were getting in straight after the Steve Irwin controversy. So everything was a mixture of it all. Was basically coming in where they were, you know, I think the network sort of made a mandate at the time to look, if we're going to have a show, we need somebody who's going to handle the phones to sort of, you know, try their best to weed out what is legitimate and what's not legitimate.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And you also get a lot of airtime on it too.
Yeah, I mean,
That's he would a bit like he would talk to you guys.
yeah. Well, see, that was the other thing about, you know, his show. He he made Garfield, you know, that ancillary character behind the scenes that he would occasionally, you know, talk to and all that sort of stuff. When I came on board, they, you know, it just seemed funny that, you know, Garfield and Odie out of the comic strip. That's basically how the name sort of got placed. And he did the same thing, you know, like in the initial, I think nearly a year. Um, there, you know, you wouldn't have known that I would have been working there unless you called in
Yeah.
to the show. But then occasionally he would name drop me, and then eventually, you know, they hooked it up so my mic could be turned on from inside there. So when they wanted to talk to me, they would talk to me, and then we started that that silly podcast
Yeah.
that went
Which
all different ways. But it's interesting that I don't think like, Spoonie says it right now. Like he's actually he had copies of it on his hard drive somewhere, and he went back and he only listened to it recently, like the God knows how many episodes it was, 40 or odd so episodes. I can't remember.
yeah.
But he went back and listened to it, and he goes, "Jesus, we were." These were good. Like, yeah, I know. And Garfield gets angry about it. He goes, I was trying to tell you how good they were.
I was trying to tell you how good, but no one ever listened to me.
But he was, you know, it was more so that Garfield had more insight into, or foresight, depending on which way you look at it. Like he saw how well this could go. But then, you know, things
Yeah.
changed that were out of our control and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. People moved on, and
So we had to, it just had to stop. Um, it's interesting now, you know, looking back on it, that I have no doubt that if you know, that I'm not trying to big note ourselves or anything like that, but I honestly think that we were one of the pioneers of that sort of long form conversation podcasting, because you got to remember at the time that podcasting at that time was purely radio breakfast shows,
yeah.
grabbing the bits, or drive shows, just grabbing the bits and uploading them.
Yeah.
Somebody can history check on me on this or anything like that. I'm saying this from a point of pure ignorance. Then
Yeah.
that that podcast that we created, it wasn't well prepared at all. Like, and you can go back and you can listen to some episodes where Spoonie gets actually really angry about how underprepared we were
Yeah.
for those podcasts. But what the general idea was, it was just long form conversations, because some of them I think go for about 50 minutes and all that sort of stuff. Now everyone's doing that.
Yeah. Now everyone.
Everybody is doing that. The only thing that annoys me is I realize, like, you know, we could have made millions of dollars off it.
Yeah. Could have made you guys could have been living in mansions by now.
Well, I mean, look at a show like Joe Rogan, long form podcast. He
Yeah.
just signed a what was it, $200 million deal with Spotify?
Yeah.
Oh, the what
Ah,
if, huh?
what if the what ifs? And now Spoonie working back on Triple M in Hobart, which is different again because he's doing breakfast hours.
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, I jumped on the bandwagon, but it was Spoonie and Garfield who were, Garfield more so. Like, again, I give this man a lot of props. He had that foresight where he was actually very, very vocal to Triple M management at the time, as they were going through their breakfast sort of churn. This is just before they launched the first incarnation of the Grill team at the time. But Garfield was very, very vocal about what they should be doing is they should be going with Spoonman and having the guts to do FM talk in Sydney
in the morning.
during breakfast. And it was poo-pooed and all that sort of stuff. And I get it. Radio stations have consultants and all that sort of stuff. And that idea to them was just way out there, way out there. And look where it is now. I mean, it took 12 years.
Yeah.
And it's in Hobart. It's not in Sydney, but, time will tell how good it is working for them. I mean, he was doing it for a different station in another town in Tasmania, and he was killing it.
Yeah.
Killing it.
And then...
So I have no doubts that, it's still early days for him in Hobart doing the FM talk thing, but I have no doubts that it'll go through the roof for him. The only problem is that if management realize how well it is, they're never going to be able to convince him to leave Hobart
and be like, hey,
Sydney. They just won't.
Yeah, yeah. If only there was some way to do it naturally.
Well, they gave it a shot for a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly how it was received, but they gave it a shot for a bit on the on that Triple M regional network that they've got around about 40 odd stations. So
yeah, I found it good listening to it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to listen to it. I'd be interested to go back and see how he formatted the show specifically. I would love for him to be national like that, but at the same time, a part of me doesn't, because then that takes away a breakfast job for somebody out in one of those regional stations, who have their breakfast show and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So, when I'm not too sure, do you get ad checks sent to you? Ever? Yeah.
Occasionally, what used to happen for me on the Gold Coast was whenever they hired a new street teamer and all that sort of stuff, the street teamer would used to send me breaks and all that sort of gear, and I'd give them my advice and all that sort of stuff. If I saw that somebody had that hint of talent, then I would sort of go to our bosses and go, I think we should give them a shot. Let's see how they go. There was one guy that they picked up, and he was really, really talented, but one of those guys who just, he loved doing it for that, but it wasn't his passion. But God, he had a good talent for doing it.
And now, get into the ending about this show. Do you have any advice for anyone wanting to break into radio or podcasting?
Yeah, well, I'll start with radio, and then I'll move to podcast.
Yeah.
So, you'd when it comes to radio, you're going to have to choose exactly what it is that you think that you are going to achieve. Now, I'm only saying that in the sense of I can only remember how I was trying to get into radio, and it's changed completely. So the idea of being able to get on air seemed a lot more open than it does now. There's so much networking done with radio, especially post breakfast and basically for the rest of the day. From after 9 o'clock, there's so many stations who are networked from 9 o'clock all the way through until 6 a.m. the next morning. So the window to get on air is very, very, very small. There is a lot of opportunities to do a breakfast show as such, be part of a breakfast show. So that would be your avenue in if your idea is, I want to get on air. If you're listening after 9 o'clock and you like, doing the bits in between the songs and the competitions and just the short, snappy pieces like that I used to. Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be real hard. There are a few country stations that will take you up on that, but you're probably not going to go far from there. I mean, it's a good way of cutting your teeth and getting used to being behind a mic and all that sort of stuff. But if your idea is to get on air, I'll go down at the breakfast show path. At least, you know, there's to me, it seems like there's more of a chance. But those music shift roles, a lot of them are taken up, and the people who have them are holding on for dear life to keep them. Like, just think, if I think of Sydney, you know, somebody like Gordy, he's
Gordy
been doing it for specifically for KISS for the last 6 years. I think I'm just throwing that number out off the top of my head, but I think it's around about that much time. Becco's been on air at Triple M. Like, he was there when I left, and I've done a 10-year journey around.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why he's still there, because he's the best.
Yeah.
For that brand.
Yeah.
In Melbourne, there's a prime example of Craig Huggins, Huggy.
Huggy, yeah.
Who's been doing it for 30 odd years. And there's a reason why he's been doing it for 30 odd years. Because he's loved and he's great at what he does.
And also Dange.
Yeah, Dangerous Dave.
Dangerous Dave.
Another example. Somebody who they've got that position because they are the best at what they do and they're holding on to it. Now, contrast that with breakfast shows, for example. If you were to do your research on the breakfast shows, not just in Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide and Perth and Brizzy, but just around those sort of regional markets, they have a lot of turnover. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to actually get in there. And if you've got it, they will notice you, but you've got to have to make yourself stand out at the same time. So that's how I think about radio when it comes to being on air. I just don't think unless the entire medium changes completely from what it is that I'm looking at right now, music jocks, I just don't see it happening. And yeah, that might come across as really negative. And if that was your idea, I'm really sorry. I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to tell you that you're not going to succeed at it. If that's what you want and if that's what you believe in, go for it. Just do it. Give it a shot. I just wanted to be realistic at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, still with radio, if you want to make yourself valuable to a radio station where they will fight for you, so much so that you could end up becoming a freelancer and charging whatever you want to them, because I've now seen this happen with a lot more. There's an online content producer who can make videos. If you can make videos, if you're handy with Photoshop, have basic audio editing skills, and you only need basic audio editing skills because the more complex audio stuff will get done for you. But if you can edit a video and make a video look great, radio stations around this country will fight for you. They'll offer you big cash. And you could get to a point where you just go, you know what? I'm just going to become a freelancer. And you can sit there and you can charge whatever you want. And people will come to you. Like, these stations will come to you.
I was going to say, I'm that quickly. I've been listening to a podcast the other day. And do you know Steve Fitton?
Steve Fitton. Yeah, he's here at Sydney at WSFM.
Yeah, he went on a podcast. Airheads, the podcast the other day.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, so I can't really comment on what they were talking about or anything like that. Unless you can fill me in, but
I found it interesting. It was really good.
Okay, What is it? A
Yeah.
music podcast?
No, so it's a podcast about radio
Okay.
and he talked to people how they got into radio there and about their journey in radio, and then get a bit of advice from them. And
Hmm.
I found he won. So over his radio journey, he would bitten by the radio bug, and it
Oh,
would
mate,
have to.
it happens. I
Yeah,
mean, some people get bitten by it, and it sticks with them. Steve's of a different caliber than I am. Like he still loves the medium and all that sort of stuff, and it's clearly evident. Like I get to work with him every day.
yeah,
He's brilliant at his job, and he still loves that what he does. So I can see why they would want to speak to him.
they also had Mike Hammond,
All right.
and then, like in episode 78, I was like, oh, they get in a lot of WSFM and a lot of AAN.
Well, if that's it's actually a good segue now into what my advice about podcasting is and all that sort of stuff. So you mentioned the Airheads podcast there.
Yep.
So, they've got a certain topic by sound of things, and I'm only going off from what you told me. So, Airhead,
Yeah.
guys, if you do hear this, it's not just being disrespectful, but, they've got their certain topic and, they've chosen that niche, which is fine. As long as they can keep bringing in, and there is a wealth of talent out there, as long as they can keep bringing it in, that's fantastic. So the brilliant part about podcasting is, well, you don't need a radio station to work for anymore. Like, for example, what you're doing there, like, here it is. This is, you could stick this up on Spotify and you can let Spotify handle the songs for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So a radio station isn't needed anymore. I'm trying to get mine off the ground. I'm doing a little bit more work behind the scenes at the moment. I'm trying to make mine a little bit more visual. So I don't need to go to a radio station now to create that podcast. So if anything that I've said before about, if you wanted to get on air in the traditional medium, then go down that avenue. But if you've got an idea, or if you just want to sit there and talk because you've got stuff on your mind that you want to say, you don't need much to get it going. You really don't. Some people do it just with their laptop, which is fine. As you build and as you grow, you can start investing some dollars into different pieces. But the audio editing software, there's plenty of free options out there. The one that comes to mind immediately, and that's what I used in the very, very early days of my radio career, is Audacity, is what it's called.
Yeah, Audacity.
It works perfect. Perfect. I'm in a position now where I got access to something like Adobe Audition. It's got all these bells and whistles in it, but I don't use them. But I've got access to it. And the microphones that you can buy that sound good, they're just becoming cheaper and cheaper. And when I say cheaper, I don't mean that they're cheap and nasty. There's some good quality mics. The prices are just coming down, and it's becoming really easy for you to do it. It's funny, it was only about probably 8 years ago where I just didn't see the value in podcasting at all. But now I see it as a massive value. Massive.
Yeah, especially like if you can get it on YouTube and whatnot, get some followers there.
Just
Like,
diversify where you put it. You'd be surprised about how many different platforms there are for you to put your content on. I know there's the big three in Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and obviously for the audio versions only, of Apple Podcasts and Spotify and whatever else there is. But there are so many brand new digital platforms being birthed all the time. The more you spread out, the more ears you're going to have, or eyes on the product that you have, and you've got the ability there not only just to sit there and put your ideas out for the world to hear, but you got the ability to sit there and make some serious cash as well. Some serious cash.
Thank you again for joining us tonight, Bryan.
Not a problem, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been awesome. Hopefully all this madness is over soon, and well, hopefully one day we can meet in person.
Yeah, why not?
Even though I have met you in person, like properly meet without like these.
We'll do one together in the same room. And
yeah.
if it ever gets to that point, or if you want me back on, I'll give you my prediction for the future of radio. How's that?
Okay.
Yeah. The next time we speak.
Oh, next time we speak. Okay, sounds good.
You're going to have to remember that because I won't.
I'll remember because I'll be in the podcast. Until next time, I've been Forkman. My guest had been
Bryan Madigan. Thanks for having me.